New footage just surfaced showing Brittney Griner working out alongside male prisoners in Russia. And while it may shock some viewers, Griner herself had already revealed she was transferred to a men's prison during her detention.
I had to get transferred from the penal colony to the men's prison in Moscow. And I got checked into there. They had me stripped down butt naked in front of a room of probably about 7, 8 men.
This leaked clip has people convinced their suspicions about her identity were right all along.
Brittney Griner is, in fact, a man.
I've got all the details. Let's break it down. The arrest and descent into hell. Let's start at the beginning, on that fateful day that would change everything. February 17th, 2022, the date that would forever be etched in Brittney Griner's memory as the day her world came crashing down. Standing at 6'9" inches tall with a wingspan that dominated basketball courts across the globe, Griner was no stranger to being noticed. But on this cold Moscow morning at Sheremetyevo International Airport, the attention she received would be of an entirely different nature. Griner was arrested on February 17th, 2022, at Sheremetyevo International Airport near Moscow after Russian customs officials discovered vape cartridges containing less than 1 gram of cannabis oil in her luggage. The substance, legal in parts of the United States where Griner held a medical prescription for chronic pain management, was strictly forbidden under Russian law.
So you reached down because you've been told to go through your bag.
Yep.
And you felt
the cartridge.
This wasn't supposed to happen. Griner had been making this journey between the United States and Russia since 2014, playing for UMMC Ekaterinburg during the WNBA offseason. She earned over $1 million annually in Russia, far more than her WNBA salary of around $227,000. A stark reminder of the pay disparities that forced many female athletes to seek opportunities overseas. But this time was different. The geopolitical landscape had shifted dramatically. Just 7 days after Griner's arrest, Russia would launch its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, plunging U.S.-Russia relations to their lowest point since the Cold War. What should have been a routine return to her second home would instead become the opening chapter of an international crisis. The cartridges contained 0.7 grams of hashish oil, an amount so small it would barely register in most legal systems. Yet under Russia's draconian drug laws, it qualified as large-scale transportation of illegal narcotics, carrying a potential sentence of up to 10 years in prison. As the reality of her situation began to sink in, Griner found herself thrust into a system designed to break the human spirit. The initial detention facility was described as extremely filthy, far worse than anything she could imagine. The conditions were medieval: no toothbrush, no soap, insufficient toilet paper that forced her to rip up her own shirts for basic hygiene needs. But perhaps even more disturbing than the physical conditions was the psychological warfare that began almost immediately. Guards subjected her to degrading treatment, including stripping her naked multiple times for inspections and gawking at her body. As a 6'9" black lesbian woman in a country with strict anti-LGBTQ+ laws, Griner represented everything that Russia's authoritarian system sought to suppress. The guards seemed to take particular pleasure in tormenting their high-profile prisoner. They would play psychological games, at one point directing her toward a men's cell before redirecting her to the women's side, a cruel reminder of how her physical appearance had made her a target for gender-based harassment throughout her life.
I remember in junior high, the girls coming up to me and literally talking to somebody else, touch my chest and say, "Oh, see, she's not really a real girl. She has no chest. Listen to her voice."
The isolation was perhaps the most brutal aspect of those early days. Cut off from her family, her wife Sherelle, and the outside world, Griner found herself trapped in a maze of Russian bureaucracy with no clear path to freedom. The language barrier made every interaction a struggle, and the constant uncertainty about her fate began to take its toll on her mental health. She contemplated suicide multiple times during those first few weeks, finding makeshift weapons in her cell, but ultimately choosing to fight on for the sake of her family. The thought of her body never being returned to her loved ones was what ultimately stayed her hand during those darkest moments. As days turned into weeks, it became clear that this was no ordinary drug possession case. The timing of her arrest, just days before the Ukraine invasion, suggested something far more sinister. U.S. officials quickly began to suspect that Griner was being used as a political pawn, a high-profile hostage to leverage against Western sanctions. The Russian legal system moved with the efficiency of a well-oiled propaganda machine. Griner was forced to sign documents in Russian that she couldn't read or understand, a violation of international law that would have been grounds for case dismissal in any legitimate court system. But legitimacy was never the point. This was about power, about sending a message to the West, and about extracting maximum political capital from the suffering of an innocent woman whose only crime was a moment of absent-mindedness while packing her luggage. Inside the Nightmare. The transfer came in November 2022, after months of legal proceedings that were as predictable as they were unjust. On November 4th, 2022, Griner was transferred to IK2, a women's penal colony in Yavas, Mordovia, over 300 miles southeast of Moscow. This facility, a remnant of the Soviet Gulag system, was notorious for brutal conditions that had been described by human rights groups as a legal slavery system. To understand the horror of what Griner was about to face, we need to step back and examine the Russian penal system itself. These aren't just prisons. They're institutions designed to break the human spirit, to reduce proud individuals to mere shadows of their former selves. And IK2 was among the worst of them all. The facility housed hundreds of women in multi-level barracks called detachments, overseen by guards and senior inmates in a hierarchy designed to pit prisoners against each other. Overcrowding was rampant, with 60 women crammed into spaces designed for half that number, creating conditions that facilitated the spread of disease and despair in equal measure.
The mattress had a huge blood stain on it, and they give you these thin 2 sheets, so you're basically laying on bars. From middle of my shin to my feet, stuck through the bars, which in prison, you don't really want to stick your leg and arm through bars.
The living conditions were nothing short of medieval. Griner's cell was a testament to decades of neglect and deliberate cruelty. Dirt and grime covered every surface. Bloodstains marked the thin mattress that would be her bed, and black mold crept across the walls like a living disease. She was forced to use expired toothpaste from 15 years prior to scrub the mold from the walls. A desperate attempt to create some semblance of sanitary conditions in an environment designed to degrade human dignity. The temperature was a constant torment. Russia's harsh winter made the unheated cells into freezing chambers of suffering. Griner's dreadlocks, which she had worn for nearly 20 years, began to freeze when wet, leading to constant illness. The decision to cut them off wasn't just about practicality, it was about survival, and it represented a profound loss of identity for a woman whose appearance had already made her a target for harassment her entire life.
People knew you for so long with the dreadlocks. You decided to cut them. What was that like, losing that part of you too?
Honestly, it just had to happen. We had spiders above my bed, making nests. My dreads started to freeze. They would just stay wet and cold, and I was getting sick.
But the physical conditions were only part of the torture. The daily routine at IK2 was designed to crush the human spirit through relentless labor and psychological manipulation. Roll call began at 6 a.m., followed by mandatory outdoor exercises, even in blizzards, then long work shifts until sundown, with lights out at 10 p.m.
Like, we working in the factory. We in Fabrica. We cutting, we making military equipment.
That's what they had y'all do.
Sun up to sun. Once you get to that penal colony, you're working, no matter what.
The irony was as bitter as it was deliberate. An American basketball star, imprisoned on trumped-up charges during a time of war, was forced to manufacture uniforms for the very military that was committing atrocities in Ukraine. She worked 16 hours daily, sewing military uniforms, starting with clipping threads and buttoning jackets that bruised her hands, then cutting fabric on rusted, shieldless machines that posed constant injury risks. The work was dangerous in ways that went beyond mere physical exhaustion. One inmate near Griner had her fingers stitched together by the faulty machinery and was forced to continue working despite bleeding, a stark reminder that in this system, human beings were viewed as nothing more than disposable resources. But perhaps the most psychologically damaging aspect of prison life was the social hierarchy among the inmates themselves. A senior inmate named Val, a former criminal leader, controlled phone access and restroom use, restricting newcomers like Griner from calls for a year. This wasn't just bureaucracy, it was a deliberate system of control that forced prisoners to compete for basic human needs. The cellmates Griner encountered painted a picture of a system that made no distinction between the severity of crimes. One early cellmate was a woman who had killed a pregnant rival with an axe and was routinely abused by other inmates who put cigarettes out on her body. Another cellmate had been convicted of crimes so heinous involving child exploitation that even hardened criminals shunned her, creating an atmosphere of constant tension and fear. The psychological warfare continued even during rare moments of supposed rest. Griner celebrated Thanksgiving alone with smoked turkey and rice, aching for her family while phone calls required external permission that was rarely granted. The isolation was as much a weapon as the physical deprivation.
They trying to offer me to eat. They like, we got food. They said they got steak. I'm like, no, I'm not about to get poisoned before I go home. because I don't trust y'all.
Food was another tool of control and degradation. Meals consisted of porridge described as cement-like and inedible cafeteria offerings served 3 times daily, with occasional treats like honey cake providing rare moments of relief in an otherwise relentless campaign of nutritional warfare. The healthcare system was virtually non-existent. Facilities existed but were ineffective, with diseases spreading unchecked in the overcrowded conditions. For an elite athlete accustomed to world-class medical care, this was yet another layer of psychological torture, watching her body deteriorate while knowing that simple medical intervention could alleviate her suffering. As December 8, 2022 approached, Griner had no idea that her ordeal was finally nearing its end. The prisoner swap that would secure her freedom was being negotiated at the highest levels of international diplomacy, but for the woman suffering in her frozen cell, hope was a luxury she could no longer afford. What happened next would become the source of widespread misinformation and speculation, but the truth, as we'll reveal in our final segment, is both more complex and more disturbing than the rumors suggest. The final humiliation, freedom, and ongoing persecution. The morning of December 8, 2022, began like any other in the frozen hell of IK2. Brittney Griner had no way of knowing that this would be her last day in Russian captivity, that after 293 days of unimaginable suffering, freedom was finally within reach. But before that freedom could be achieved, the Russian authorities had one final act of cruelty planned, a psychological torture so calculated and degrading that it would become the source of lasting trauma and widespread misinformation. Griner was suddenly transferred from the women's penal colony to a men's prison in Moscow for processing. This wasn't a housing assignment. It was a brief but deliberate act of humiliation designed to break her spirit one final time before her release.
Like, I had to get transferred from the penal colony to the men's prison in Moscow, and I got checked into there. I knew I was getting traded, but the way they were treating me and their one little last play to terrorize me or mess with me, because when they were checking me in, they had me stripped down butt naked in front of a room of like probably about 7, 8 men.
This is the incident that has been distorted and sensationalized across social media platforms, spawning conspiracy theories and false narratives about Griner's gender and treatment. The truth is far more straightforward and infinitely more disturbing. This was a calculated act of psychological warfare, a final attempt to strip away whatever dignity she had managed to preserve during her months of captivity.
And they had the Polaroid, and they got me spinning in a circle while they like taking photos, right, of my tattoos, because my tattoos are, you know, whatever they are. That was their last little, I guess, addict to mess with me.
The guards forced her to spin in circles while they photographed her naked body with Polaroid cameras, ostensibly to document her tattoos, but really to inflict one final act of dehumanization. It wasn't about protocol, it was about control, shame, and inflicting psychological damage. The fact that this occurred in front of 8 men was no accident. It was designed to maximize her humiliation and vulnerability. But even in this moment of ultimate degradation, Griner's spirit refused to be completely broken. When the guards attempted to place her in a cell with male inmates, she drew a line in the sand that she would not cross. This moment of resistance was crucial. It demonstrated that even after nearly 10 months of systematic abuse, Brittney Griner had not been completely broken. She was still capable of standing up for herself, still possessed the inner strength that had carried her through the darkest days of her captivity. The guards, perhaps recognizing that they had pushed as far as they could without risking an international incident, relented. She was not forced into the cell with male inmates, and was instead moved by masked operatives to a secret airfield for the prisoner swap. It's important to understand what this incident represents and what it doesn't. The rumors that have circulated suggesting Griner was housed long-term with male prisoners, or that she was subjected to some form of gender-based reassignment, are categorically false. This was a brief, calculated act of psychological torture that lasted hours, not days or weeks. It was designed to humiliate and degrade, not to house or confine. The transfer to the airfield marked the beginning of the end of her ordeal, but even then, the psychological warfare continued. The masked operatives who escorted her made crude jokes about her sexuality, asking about her husband, and seeming confused when she corrected them about her wife. Even in these final moments, her identity as a gay woman made her a target for mockery and abuse.
But one of them, he wanted to be funny guy. He's like, oh, you know, your husband's waiting on you, you know, when you get back. And I'm like, nah, I ain't got no husband. I said, my wife. He's like, wife? I'm like, yeah, my wife. Like, what? I'm a lesbian, bro.
The prisoner exchange itself, when it finally came, was surreal. On December 8th, 2022, at Al Bateen Executive Airport in Abu Dhabi, Griner walked past Victor Bout, the Merchant of Death, in a carefully choreographed swap.
And so we do the swap. We're walking. So Victor Boot, Merchant of Death, all that. We're walking towards each other.
So you see him?
Oh yeah, I see him. We shake hands. They cut the film. We shook hands. Like it was a simultaneous kind of like
a switch,
shake
like
of hands, and he wished me luck and said, glad I was going home. I said, glad you're going home too.
The controversy surrounding this exchange continues to this day. Critics argued that trading a convicted arms dealer for a basketball player was an unequal exchange that could encourage more hostage-taking. Others pointed out that Bout was nearing the end of his sentence anyway, and that no American should be left to rot in a foreign prison for a minor drug offense. But for Griner, standing on that tarmac in Abu Dhabi, the politics were secondary to the overwhelming relief of knowing that her nightmare was finally over. She boarded the American plane and began the journey home to freedom, carrying with her the physical and psychological scars of an ordeal that would take years to fully process and understand. The road to recovery has been long and difficult. Griner has spoken openly about her struggle with PTSD, the nightmares that haunted her sleep, and the challenge of readjusting to normal life. The woman who returned to American soil was not the same person who had been arrested at that Moscow airport nearly a year earlier.
I would fake go to sleep with my wife. She'd go to sleep and I'd wake back up and like I'd just be all off around the house because I didn't want to keep her up. And then she's dealing, like she's trying to, you know, get back to her normal too.
The physical toll was equally devastating. Griner gained significant weight during her detention, reaching 260 pounds at one point while struggling with the psychological trauma. The elite athlete's body had been transformed by months of poor nutrition, forced labor, and psychological stress. However, what Griner couldn't have anticipated was that returning home would bring its own form of persecution, one that would echo the dehumanization she experienced in Russian custody. In 2025, viral videos of Griner speaking courtside reignited long-standing rumors and harassment about her gender identity, with her deep voice shocking some fans and sparking new waves of cruel speculation.
I'm ready to get there. I'm ready to just learn from her. Got to play with her a little bit with USA, and I'm just ready to feed off her and just give all I can to the Phoenix Mercury.
A round of applause for my wife, honestly. She had the hardest job, honestly. Thank you so much, babe, for being there for me.
Recently, a viral video has been circulating showing Brittney without a shirt, sparking widespread controversy and speculation.
Let me see something real quick. Brick! Thank you! Get the hell out of here, yo! Yo!
Many are claiming the footage provides alleged evidence supporting the claim that Brittney is biologically male. These rumors, which have plagued Griner since her college days, falsely claim she is transgender or biologically male, despite multiple fact checks confirming she is a cisgender woman. The harassment often stems from her 6'9" inches height, deep voice, and athletic build, the same physical characteristics that made her a target for cruel treatment in Russian prison. But perhaps most disturbing is how some have weaponized her Russian imprisonment experience to fuel these false narratives. Misinformation has spread claiming she was held in men's facilities because Russia knew her gender, completely ignoring the verified fact that she was housed in women's facilities throughout her detention. Medical experts have repeatedly explained that Griner's deep voice is natural for someone of her height, with larger vocal cords and thoracic cavity creating lower pitch. Yet the harassment continues, representing a form of ongoing psychological torture that mirrors what she experienced in Russian custody. The parallels are haunting. Just as Russian guards treated her as a spectacle, social media trolls continue to objectify and dehumanize her. Just as prison officials questioned her identity and dignity, online harassers continue to attack her fundamental humanity. The cruelty may have changed locations, but the underlying motivation remains the same: the desire to break down someone who refuses to conform to others' expectations.
I feel my new normal. Like my older normal is like that innocence, and then once you lose your innocence, like, you know, you're kind of like just like that adult, I guess.
But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Brittney Griner's story is not what was done to her, but how she has chosen to respond. Rather than retreating from public life, she has become an advocate for other Americans detained overseas, using her platform to shine a light on cases that might otherwise be forgotten. She has partnered with organizations like Bring Our Families Home, working tirelessly to raise awareness about Americans like Paul Whelan and Evan Gershkovich, who remain in foreign custody. Her message to them is simple but powerful: don't give up. We're going to keep doing everything we can.
Don't give up. Don't give up. We're going to keep doing everything we can. We're going to make as much noise as we can, and we're going to use our platforms as much as we can to bring you home.
The truth about Brittney Griner's time in Russian prison is far more complex and disturbing than the sensationalized rumors that have circulated on social media. She was not housed with male prisoners for any extended period, but she was subjected to systematic psychological and physical abuse designed to break her spirit. She endured conditions that no human being should have to face, yet she emerged with her dignity intact and her commitment to helping others stronger than ever. Today, Brittney Griner continues to play basketball at the highest level, recently signing with the Atlanta Dream and continuing to compete internationally. But more importantly, she has become a voice for the voiceless, a beacon of hope for those who find themselves trapped in foreign prisons through no fault of their own. The rumors and conspiracy theories will likely continue to circulate, spread by those who seek to diminish her courage or exploit her suffering for political gain. But the truth, documented in her own words and corroborated by multiple sources, tells a different story. The story of an American hero who survived hell and emerged stronger than ever, determined to ensure that no one else has to endure what she experienced during those 293 days in Russian captivity. Enjoyed the video? Tap the cards on your screen for more content just like this.